My name is Alyssa Bennett, and the night my mother-in-law ordered me to cook Christmas dinner for 50 guests, she made the mistake of doing it in front of everyone. She smiled like I was hired help and said, "Try not to ruin my son's reputation this time." My husband did not defend me. He leaned back, laughed, and told his friends, "She knows her place when Mom gives instructions." I looked at the crystal glasses, the polished table, and the woman sitting in my house like a queen. Then I touched the folder inside my purse and smiled, because by morning, the empty kitchen would be the least humiliating thing they faced. Welcome back to Revenge Story. It was one day before Christmas, and our house looked like a magazine cover pretending to be a home. Gold ribbons curled around the staircase. White lights climbed the windows. A 10-foot Christmas tree stood in the living room, heavy with glass ornaments my mother-in-law had chosen herself and paid for with my card, though she never mentioned that part. Carol Bennett loved beautiful things, especially when someone else carried the weight behind them. She was standing near the fireplace in a cream silk blouse, holding a glass of wine she had not poured for herself. My husband, Ryan, sat on the couch with two of his office friends, both laughing too loudly at jokes that were not funny. I had just come in from the grocery store, my hands red from the cold, carrying bags filled with ingredients for the small Christmas dinner I thought Ryan and I were having before our trip. Our trip. That was what kept me moving that week. 3 months earlier, I had booked a Christmas escape to Hawaii. Oceanfront suite, private dinner by the water, a sunrise boat tour, no cooking, no cleaning, no Carol walking into my kitchen and inspecting my oven like she owned it. Ryan had agreed with a lazy smile, kissed my forehead, and said, "You deserve it, babe." I should have known that when Ryan said I deserved something, he meant I deserved to pay for it, plan it, and then give it up the moment his mother wanted attention. I set the grocery bags on the island and began unloading them. Carol watched me the way a woman watches a maid she is already disappointed in. "Alyssa," she said, dragging my name out like it tasted bitter. "We need to talk about tomorrow." Ryan did not look at me. That told me he already knew. I placed a carton of eggs into the fridge. "About what?" Carol smiled. That smile had ruined more evenings than yelling ever could. "I invited a few people for Christmas dinner." I closed the fridge slowly. "How many is a few?" She lifted one shoulder. 50. The room went quiet for one tiny second, not because anyone thought she was wrong, but because they wanted to see my reaction. I did not give them one. 50 guests, I repeated. Ryan finally looked up. "Mom's relatives, some neighbors, a few people from my office. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I asked. Carol gave a little laugh. "Alyssa, please. It's Christmas. Women have handled dinners before. Don't act like I asked you to rebuild the house." One of Ryan's friends smirked into his glass. I looked at my husband. "We fly out tomorrow morning." Ryan rubbed his jaw, already annoyed by the inconvenience of my memory. "We can reschedule Hawaii." "We?" I said quietly. "You mean I can reschedule it?" Carol stepped closer to the island. That trip was selfish from the beginning, running away during Christmas when this family has traditions. I wanted to ask which traditions she meant. The tradition of criticizing my cooking while eating 3 plates? The tradition of telling people Ryan bought the house when he had never paid a single property tax bill? The tradition of treating me like a temporary guest in a home that had my name buried inside its legal bones? Instead, I simply picked up a bag of cranberries and placed it in the bowl. Ryan sighed. "Alyssa, don't start. Mom invited people already. It would embarrass us if there's no dinner." Carol clicked her tongue. "It would embarrass Ryan, not us. Ryan has a position to maintain." There it was. Ryan's reputation, Carol's favorite religion. She could forgive cruelty. She could forgive laziness. She could forgive lies. But she could not forgive a damaged image. I looked at the men on the couch, at Carol's perfect hair, at Ryan's bored face, and something inside me became very still. Not broken, not angry in the loud way. Still. That kind of stillness is dangerous because it does not ask for permission. "And what exactly do you expect me to do?" I asked. Carol's eyes brightened because she thought she had won. "Cook, of course. Turkey, ham, sides, desserts. Clean the house. Set the table. Make sure the guest rooms are presentable in case anyone stays late. And wear something decent. Nothing too plain. People will be watching." Ryan added, "And please don't bring up Hawaii tomorrow. It makes you sound ungrateful." Ungrateful. I almost laughed. For 4 years, I had lived in that house with a man who called my efforts support when he wanted praise and nothing special when he wanted control. I decorated every holiday, hosted every dinner, remembered every birthday, bought every gift, and quietly covered expenses Ryan forgot, ignored, or lied about. Carol had moved into our guest suite 6 months after our wedding, just for a few weeks. Those weeks became years. She rearranged furniture, corrected my recipes, invited people without asking, and told everyone she was keeping the Bennett home alive. The Bennett home. That was the lie that sat at the center of everything. The house had belonged to no Bennett for a long time. But I was not ready to say that yet. Not in that kitchen. Not while Carol still believed she was giving orders. I wiped my hands on a towel and nodded. "Okay." Ryan blinked. "Okay." "Yes," I said. "If this is what you both want, I understand." Carol looked pleased, but a little suspicious. Cruel people get nervous when their target stops bleeding. "Good," she said. "I knew you could be reasonable." Ryan smiled at his friends. "See? She just needs a minute." His friend chuckled. "Man, you've got her trained." A thin silence cut through the room. That was the line. Not because it hurt more than the others, but because Ryan laughed. My husband laughed. He did not correct him. He did not flinch. He did not even have the shame to look away. He laughed like my humiliation was part of the entertainment. I looked at him and smiled. Not sweetly, not warmly, just enough. Then I picked up my purse from the counter, feeling the folder inside it press against my fingers. The folder had been prepared by my attorney that morning. Inside were copies of the deed, trust documents, occupancy notices, guest removal authorization, and a court-stamped order tied to a civil complaint I had filed after discovering Carol had been hosting paid holiday events in my home without my consent. That was Carol's little secret. For months, she had been using my house as a social stage. Charity brunches, private dinners, women's club gatherings, exclusive holiday teas. People paid her through donations. She gave them my address. She used my kitchen, my table, my parking space, my staff recommendations. My name never appeared anywhere. I found out because a woman I barely knew thanked me at a grocery store for opening the Bennett estate to the community. The Bennett estate. I had gone home that day and searched. What I found changed everything. Carol had created a private holiday event page, photos of my dining room, my staircase, my guest rooms. She wrote captions like, "Our family home welcomes tradition." She even listed Christmas dinner as a private seasonal gathering hosted by Carol Bennett, with 50 confirmed attendees. 50. They were not just relatives and friends. Some were paying guests. Carol was using me as unpaid labor for a public event inside a house she did not own. That was why I stayed calm. Because revenge is sweeter when the other person writes the invitation. That night, I did exactly what they expected for 3 hours. I polished the counter. I lined up empty serving dishes. I folded napkins. I moved through the rooms like the obedient wife they believed they had created. Carol followed behind me, issuing small corrections. Not those plates. Move the candles closer. The silverware should face inward. Don't make the cranberry sauce too sour. Last year it was aggressive. Aggressive cranberry sauce. That was the level of suffering she believed she had survived. Ryan disappeared into his office to avoid helping. I heard him laughing on the phone, telling someone, "Yeah, Mom handled it. Alyssa's doing the dinner." Mom handled it. Alyssa was doing it. That sentence told the whole marriage. At 10:30, Carol finally went upstairs. Ryan came into the kitchen wearing sweatpants and the expression of a man who thought the world had corrected itself. "Glad you didn't make this a whole thing," he said. I looked at him from the sink. "Did you ever want to go to Hawaii?" He shrugged. "Of course, but it's just a trip." "No," I said. "It was my Christmas." He rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic." I turned off the water. Ryan leaned against the island. "Look, Mom gets intense, but she cares about family. You knew that when you married me." "I thought I was marrying you," I said, "not becoming staff for your mother." His face hardened. "You live well, Alyssa." That was another phrase he loved. You live well. As if the house had fallen from heaven into his hands. As if the vacations, the furniture, the groceries, the parties, the stability, all of it came from some invisible Bennett greatness. He never asked why bills got paid when his accounts dipped. He never wondered why the house never had a mortgage statement in his name. He just enjoyed the illusion. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means a lot of women would be grateful to be in your position." I dried my hands slowly. "And what position is that?" He smiled without kindness. "My wife." There are moments in a marriage when love does not explode. It simply leaves the room. Mine left then. Quietly. Permanently. I nodded. "You're right." Ryan looked relieved. He thought agreement was surrender. I walked upstairs, packed the last of my things, and waited until the house went still. At midnight, I rolled my suitcase down the hall. The Christmas lights glowed across the floor. Carol's door was closed. Ryan was asleep, one arm thrown across my side of the bed like he still expected my body to be there. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at him. I had once loved that man. That was the part people forget about revenge. It does not begin with hatred. It begins after love has begged for dignity too many times and received a laugh in return. I left my wedding ring on the dresser. Then I walked out. A black car waited at the curb. My driver loaded my suitcase. The cold December air touched my face, sharp and clean. For the first time in years, I breathed without feeling watched. At the airport, my phone started lighting up. "Ryan, where are you?" "Ryan. Alyssa. Ryan. Are you downstairs?" "Carol. The garland in the dining room is crooked." "Carol. Also start the turkey early." "Carol. Do not ignore me today." I switched my phone to silent and boarded my flight. When the plane lifted into the dark sky, I looked out at the sleeping city below and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Carol." By sunrise, I was in Hawaii. The resort smelled like salt, flowers, and freedom. A staff member placed a lei around my neck and said, "Welcome, Mrs. Bennett. Your oceanfront suite is ready." Mrs. Bennett. For one final day, I kept the name, not because I wanted it, because I wanted Ryan to watch me remove it. I walked into the suite, opened the balcony doors, and let the ocean fill the room. Then I changed into a white linen dress, ordered breakfast, and placed my folder on the table beside a cup of Kona coffee. At 8:12 a.m., the first call came. Ryan. I let it ring. Then Carol. Then Ryan again. Then a string of messages arrived so fast they looked panicked. Ryan. Where the hell are you? Carol. This is not funny. Ryan. Guests are coming in 2 hours. Carol. The refrigerator is empty. Ryan. Did you move the food? Carol. Answer your phone. I took a photo of the ocean and sent it to Ryan. No caption. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Ryan. Are you serious? I did not answer. At 10:03 a.m., a neighbor sent me a video. Cars lined the street outside my house. Guests walked up the driveway carrying wine bottles, gift bags, and expectations. Carol stood at the front door in a red velvet dress, smiling too widely. Ryan stood beside her, checking his phone every few seconds. By 10:20, the kitchen had been discovered. Another video came from someone I did not know, probably one of Ryan's office friends. The camera showed my kitchen, empty counters, bare refrigerator shelves, no roasting pan, no pies, no trays, no staff. Nothing but a single white envelope on the island. On the front, I had written, "For Carol." I watched the video 3 times. Not because I enjoyed panic, because I wanted to remember the exact moment her kingdom became a room with no food. Carol opened the envelope in front of everyone. I could not hear every word, but I saw her face change. Inside was not the deed. Not yet. It was a printed copy of her own event listing. Carol Bennett's private Christmas gathering, 50 guests, suggested donation, exclusive holiday dinner, Bennett family home. Below it was a note from me. Carol, since you sold seats to a dinner in my kitchen, I redirected the food to people who were invited honestly. Enjoy explaining the menu. That morning, the catering order she did not know about had arrived somewhere else. A women's shelter downtown received turkey, ham, desserts, sides, gifts, decorations, and handwritten Christmas cards. I had paid for everything. I had simply changed the address. Carol's 50 guests got an empty kitchen. Women and children who actually needed warmth got the feast. That was the first plate of revenge. The second arrived at 10:45. My attorney, Mason Clark, pulled into the driveway with 2 court officers and local police standing behind him. I watched through the security cameras from my balcony in Hawaii. Carol was in the foyer, surrounded by confused guests. Ryan was red-faced, holding his phone like he wanted to throw it through a wall. Then the doorbell rang. Carol opened it. Mason stood there in a dark coat, calm as winter. "Mrs. Carol Bennett?" he asked. She lifted her chin. "Who are you?" "Mason Clark, attorney for Alyssa Bennett." Ryan stepped forward. "What is this?" Mason looked past him into the house. "I'm here regarding unauthorized commercial use of private property, removal of non-resident guests, and formal notice of occupancy termination." Carol laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. "Get off my porch." Mason held up the documents. "Ma'am, this porch belongs to my client." That was the moment I saw Ryan freeze, not Carol. Carol was still too arrogant to understand danger when it wore a suit. Ryan understood faster because somewhere deep inside, he knew there were things he had never bothered to question. "This is my family home," Carol snapped. "No," Mason said. "This property is held under the Whitmore Family Trust, transferred to Alyssa Bennett before her marriage. Your son has resided here as her spouse. You have resided here by her permission. The guests inside are not authorized to remain." A woman near the staircase gasped. Someone whispered, "Her house?" Ryan grabbed the paper from Mason. "That's impossible." I wished I could have seen his face closer. The truth was strange enough to feel impossible. Years before I married Ryan, my father, Thomas Whitmore, had helped Ryan's late father during a private financial collapse. The Bennetts were drowning quietly, too proud to admit it. Their beautiful house was about to be lost. My father bought the property through a trust and allowed the family to remain there under a private occupancy agreement. He did it because Ryan's father had once saved his life in college after a car accident. My father believed in repaying debts with grace, but before he died, he changed one thing. He transferred the trust control to me. He told me only part of the story. "That house will protect you one day," he said. I did not understand then. I understood now. Carol had known. That was the twist Ryan did not see coming. Carol knew the Bennetts did not own the house. She knew my father had saved them. She knew I had legal control. But she also knew I had never looked closely at the documents because I trusted my husband and wanted peace more than power. So she built her throne on my silence. That morning, silence ended. Mason handed Ryan another document. "Mr. Bennett, your wife has initiated divorce proceedings. Separate service will be completed today. Mrs. Carol Bennett has also been issued notice related to unauthorized event activity conducted at this address." Carol's face drained of color. "Unauthorized event activity," one guest repeated. A man in a navy blazer stepped backward. "Carol, did you charge people for this?" Carol spun around. "It was a donation." Mason looked at the paper in his hand. The listing used suggested donation language, tiered access, and private property branding. That matter will be handled separately. Ryan turned toward his mother. "Mom?" Carol's mouth opened. No answer came out. That silence was worth every year I had swallowed mine. Then Mason said the line that turned the party into a public collapse. "All non-resident guests must leave the premises immediately." A woman near the dining room laughed nervously. "Surely he doesn't mean us." The police officer at the door stepped forward. "Ma'am, you need to collect your belongings and exit calmly." And just like that, 50 guests who came expecting Christmas dinner walked out past police officers into the cold. Some looked angry, some embarrassed, some whispered, some filmed. One of Ryan's office friends muttered, "Dude, what the hell?" Ryan did not answer. He stood in the foyer of my house, holding legal papers, watching his reputation bleed out onto the marble floor. Carol tried one more time. "You cannot do this on Christmas," she said. Mason's voice stayed even. "My client can enforce her property rights on any calendar date, especially after discovering that her home was being used for an unauthorized paid event." Carol looked toward the security camera near the ceiling. For the first time, she realized I was watching. Her eyes narrowed with pure hatred. I lifted my coffee cup toward the camera. She could not hear me, but I said it anyway. "You ordered dinner. I ordered consequences." At 11:30, Ryan finally called from the driveway. I answered. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Behind him, I could hear car doors closing, people murmuring, Carol crying in that dramatic way she used when anger needed a costume. "Alyssa," he said, voice low, "what did you do?" I looked at the ocean. "I stopped helping you lie." "This is insane." "No, Ryan. Insane was letting your mother treat me like staff in a house my father saved." He breathed hard into the phone. "You knew?" "I learned enough. That house was my dad's." "Was," I said gently. "Past tense matters." He went quiet. Then the anger returned. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because he still thought embarrassment was the crime. You laughed when your friend said you had me trained, I said. You told me I knew my place. You let your mother order me to serve 50 people after canceling the Christmas trip I paid for. You were not embarrassed then. That was different. No, I said. That was private cruelty performed in public. This is public truth performed legally. He had no words for that. So he reached for the only weapon weak men use when power leaves their hands. Baby, come on, he said, softening his voice. We can fix this. Mom went too far. I'll talk to her. I closed my eyes. Once, that voice would have worked. Once, I would have mistaken calm manipulation for love. Once, I would have returned home before sunset and cooked something just to make the tension stop. But the woman who did that had boarded a plane the night before and never landed in Hawaii. Someone else had. I'm not coming back, I said. Alyssa, the locks will be changed after the legal period. You and Carol will receive instructions through Mason. You're throwing away our marriage over dinner? That line was so small, so dishonest, that it almost made me sad. No, I said. I'm ending our marriage because you thought dinner was all I was worth. He said my name again, but I ended the call. Then I opened the resort app and confirmed one more detail. The private Christmas dinner by the beach was still scheduled, but the guest list had changed. Carol had spent years calling some people embarrassing. My aunt, because she worked as a housekeeper. My college friend Lila, because she was divorced. Ryan's younger cousin Megan, because she had a baby without being married. Even Carol's own sister Denise, because she lived in a small apartment and did not know how to behave around important company. Important company. I invited every person Carol had excluded from her perfect life. By sunset, they were sitting under warm lights beside the ocean, eating the Christmas dinner Carol wanted me to cook for strangers. Denise cried when she saw me. Honey, are you sure we should be here? I hugged her. You were always supposed to be. Megan arrived with her little boy, who ran straight toward the dessert table. Lila brought a red dress and a laugh that made the whole evening brighter. My aunt held my hand during dinner and said, Your father would be proud of you. That almost broke me. Not because I doubted it, because I needed to hear it. We ate slowly. We laughed. We watched waves fold into the shore. No one corrected the napkins. No one inspected the food. No one called kindness embarrassing. Halfway through dinner, the resort photographer asked if we wanted a group photo. I almost said no. Then I thought of Carol's event page. Her fake captions, her borrowed elegance, her stolen stage. I stood in the center of the group and smiled. The resort posted the photo with my permission. Caption: A beautiful private Christmas dinner hosted by Alyssa Bennett, honoring the family we choose and the dignity we keep. Within an hour, it reached people from Carol's circle. By evening, screenshots were everywhere. Carol's guests saw the dinner she had promised them happening in Hawaii, but not for them. Ryan's friends saw me standing in the middle of the life he thought I would never have without him. Carol's excluded relatives saw, finally, who had been ashamed of them and who had not. The comments did what truth often does when released into a room of lies. They spread. Wait, wasn't Carol hosting a Christmas dinner today? Why were police at the Bennett house? I heard the house belongs to Alyssa. Carol charged people? Ryan said he owned that place. By 9 p.m., Carol's world was no longer cracking. It was open. The next morning, Mason sent me a summary. Carol had left the house temporarily after being advised not to interfere with the property process. Ryan stayed at a hotel. Several guests had requested refunds for their donations. One of Ryan's senior colleagues had asked uncomfortable questions about his claims regarding family assets. The event page had been deleted, but not before Mason preserved everything. I read the email twice, then I walked down to the beach. The water was cold around my ankles. The sky was huge and bright. For years, I had made myself small to fit inside a family that needed me invisible. I had lowered my voice, softened my truth, swallowed my anger, and called it peace. But peace built on humiliation is not peace. It is a prison with pretty curtains. My phone buzzed again. A message from Carol. Carol, you selfish, cruel girl. You destroyed Christmas. I stared at the words. Then I typed back. No, Carol. I returned it to the people who deserved warmth. She replied immediately. Carol, that house will never be yours in my heart. I smiled. That was the thing about people like Carol. They believed feelings could outrank documents, possession could outrank ownership, and arrogance could outrank law. So I sent one final message. Your heart was never the deed. Then I blocked her. 3 weeks later, I returned to the house with Mason, a locksmith, and a professional cleaning crew. It felt different the moment I stepped inside. Not because the rooms had changed, they had not. The same staircase curved upward. The same windows caught the pale winter light. The same kitchen waited silently at the back of the house. But the fear was gone. Carol's perfume no longer floated in the hallway. Ryan's shoes were no longer by the door. No sharp voice called my name from another room. No one asked why dinner was late. No one treated my patience like a permanent resource. On the kitchen island sat the last thing Ryan had left behind, a Christmas card. No envelope, just a card opened flat. Inside, in Ryan's handwriting, were 4 words. Can we talk, please? I looked at it for a long moment. There had been a time when those words would have pulled me back. Not because they were enough, but because I wanted them to become enough. I wanted an apology to grow into accountability. I wanted regret to become love. I wanted him to choose me without losing everything first. But regret that arrives after consequences is not always love. Sometimes it is just panic wearing a nicer shirt. I placed the card in the trash. Then I walked to the dining room. The long table was still there, polished and empty. I remembered Carol standing at its head, assigning me tasks like she was born to command, and I was born to obey. I remembered Ryan laughing. I remembered the words. She knows her place. I ran my fingers along the back of a chair and whispered, yes, I do. My place was not behind them. My place was not in the kitchen while they performed importance in the living room. My place was not under Carol's approval or Ryan's permission. My place was wherever I could stand without shrinking. By spring, the divorce moved forward. Ryan tried to fight, of course. He claimed emotional shock. He claimed confusion. He claimed he had not known about the house. That part was true, but it did not help him. Not knowing the source of your comfort does not make it yours. Carol tried to rebuild her social circle, but people remembered too much. They remembered the empty kitchen, the police, the event listing, the resort photo, the truth that she had used a daughter-in-law she mocked to create a life she bragged about. Her name stopped opening doors. Ryan's reputation did not disappear overnight, but it changed shape. People became careful around him. Invitations slowed. Office jokes turned stiff. Men who once laughed with him now wondered what else he had exaggerated. As for me, I kept the house for a while. Not because I needed to live there forever, but because I needed to walk through every room without fear. I painted the guest suite, the one Carol had treated like her private apartment, a deep green. I turned it into a reading room, I replaced the dining room table with a smaller one. I donated half the decorations. I kept one ornament from the old tree, a tiny glass house. I hung it by the window, not on a Christmas tree, a reminder. Beautiful things can hold ugly memories, but they do not have to stay ugly forever. The following Christmas, I hosted dinner again, not for 50 guests, for 12. People who brought warmth instead of judgment. People who asked what they could do instead of what I could serve. People who laughed in my kitchen while helping wash dishes. People who understood that family is not the loudest name in the room. It is the hand that reaches for yours when no one is watching. At the end of the night, my aunt raised her glass. "To Alyssa," she said, "for finally taking back her home." Everyone smiled. I looked around the table at the soft lights, the simple food, the honest faces, and felt something settle inside me. Not revenge. That had already done its work. This was freedom, the kind that comes after the truth has finished burning through every lie. Later, when the house was quiet, I stood in the kitchen alone. The counters were clean, the fridge was full, the oven was warm. Outside, snow fell lightly across the driveway where police cars had once stood, and 50 embarrassed guests had walked away hungry. I thought about Carol's voice, Ryan's laugh, the empty kitchen, the court papers, the ocean, the dinner by the beach. Then I whispered the line I should have said long before Christmas. "You wanted me to cook in your family home, but it was never your family home. It was mine." And for the first time in years, the silence answered like peace. But that was not the last thing I did. Because a house can be reclaimed, a marriage can be ended, and a holiday can be survived. But some lies are so deep that they keep breathing unless someone closes every door they use to escape through. Carol had not only humiliated me, she had built an entire social life on the idea that I was beneath her. Ryan had not only failed me, he had turned my silence into a joke, my loyalty into free labor, and my father's protection into his family's costume. So when the legal papers settled and the divorce reached its final stage, I made one more decision. I sold the house, not because I was running away from it, not because Carol had ruined it forever, not because Ryan had taken its warmth from me. I sold it because I realized the house had already done what my father promised it would do. It had protected me. It had revealed them. It had given me the legal ground to stand on when everyone else expected me to kneel. And once it had finished that work, I no longer wanted my future built inside rooms where I had spent years being corrected, dismissed, and used. The buyer was a quiet woman named Evelyn Hart, a retired judge who wanted to turn the property into a private retreat for women rebuilding their lives after divorce, grief, and financial control. When she walked through the foyer, she did not ask about the chandeliers. She asked if the kitchen got morning light. She asked if the rooms felt safe at night. She asked if the house had ever held too much pain. I told her the truth. "Yes," I said, "but it also knows how to let pain leave." She bought it 2 weeks later. Ryan found out through Mason, not through me. Carol found out when the moving trucks arrived, and the new owner's team began removing the last pieces of Bennett performance from the rooms she had once ruled. She showed up at the gate in a dark coat, furious and shaking, demanding to be let inside one last time. The security guard did not know her. That was the part that broke her face. Not my refusal. Not the sale. The fact that a stranger looked at Carol Bennett and saw no authority at all. Ryan came with her. He looked tired. Smaller somehow. His expensive coat was wrinkled, his jaw unshaven, his confidence gone thin around the edges. "Alyssa," he said when he saw me standing near the driveway. "You sold it?" I nodded. "Yes." Carol turned on me with tears in her eyes, but even her tears sounded like accusations. That was our family home. I looked at the house, then back at her. No, Carol, it was your family story. There's a difference. Ryan stepped closer. You could have told me first. I studied him for a moment. This man who had once believed my life should bend around his convenience. You had years to ask what I carried, I said. You only started asking when you lost the benefit of not knowing. He swallowed, and for 1 second, I saw something like regret. But regret had arrived too late to be useful. Carol pointed at the house, her voice breaking into something raw and ugly. Your father had no right to take this from us. That was when I finally gave her the truth she had avoided for years. My father did not take it, I said. Your pride lost it. My father saved it. And then you spent years pretending the rescue was inheritance. The words landed hard. Ryan looked at his mother. Carol looked away. That tiny movement told him more than any document could. She had known. She had always known. She had let him believe he was the heir of something she understood he never owned. She had let him mock me inside a house my father had preserved. She had let him sit like a king in a chair borrowed from my mercy. Ryan's voice dropped. Mom, you knew? Carol said nothing. The silence was not empty. It was full of every lie she had dressed up as tradition. I did not stay to watch them argue. That was no longer my theater. I handed the keys to Evelyn's representative, signed the final property transfer papers, and walked away while Carol stood outside the gate of the house she had called hers, unable to enter. Months later, I moved into a smaller home near the water. Not Hawaii, not some dramatic mansion, not a place built to impress anyone. Just a clean, bright house with wide windows, a quiet kitchen, and a dining table that seated 6. I learned how peaceful life could feel when no one measured my worth by how much I could serve. I cooked when I wanted to. I traveled when I wanted to. I celebrated holidays with people who brought love without expecting labor in return. Sometimes people asked if revenge made me happy. The honest answer is no. Revenge did not make me happy. It made me free enough to find happiness afterward. It cleared the room. It removed the voices. It returned the truth to its rightful owner. Happiness came later, softly, in ordinary mornings, in coffee beside an open window, in dinners where no one criticized the cranberry sauce, in silence that did not feel like punishment. The last time I heard about Ryan and Carol, they were living in a rented townhouse outside the city. Carol had stopped hosting events. Ryan had left his firm after the story became too difficult to outrun. Some people said I had gone too far. Some said I should have forgiven them quietly. But those people were never asked to cook for 50 guests after being laughed at in their own home. They were never told they knew their place by the man who had promised to honor them. They were never treated like furniture inside a life their own father had built to protect them. So no, I did not feel guilty, because on that Christmas morning, I did not destroy a family. I exposed the arrangement they had mistaken for family. I did not ruin dinner. I redirected it to people who were hungry for something real. I did not steal a house. I reclaimed what was legally, morally, and painfully mine. And when Carol ordered me to serve her guests, she forgot that the most dangerous woman in the room is not always the loudest one. Sometimes she is the one folding napkins, memorizing every insult, and waiting for the exact hour when the doorbell rings. That Christmas, they wanted me in the kitchen. Instead, I gave them an empty table, a locked door, a truth they could not swallow, and a house they could no longer enter. And when I finally walked away, I did not look back at the mansion, the marriage or the woman who had mistaken my patience for weakness. I looked forward, toward the life I had been quietly saving underneath all that obedience. Then I smiled, because for the first time, no one was waiting for me to serve. No one was waiting for me to shrink. No one was waiting for me to know my place. I already knew it, and it was nowhere near them. Commentary. Let's stop right there for a second, because this story is not really about Christmas dinner. It looks like a holiday story on the surface. 50 guests, a mother-in-law in a perfect dress, a husband worried about his reputation, an empty kitchen, a trip to Hawaii, police outside the house. But underneath all that drama, this story is about something much deeper. It is about what happens when a woman becomes so useful to a family that they stop seeing her as human. And honestly, that is one of the most painful parts of Alyssa's story. Carol and Ryan did not hate her because she was useless. They mistreated her because she was useful. She cooked. She hosted. She decorated. She paid. She planned. She rescued their image again and again. And because she kept doing everything quietly, they started believing her silence was permission. That is where cruelty becomes dangerous. Not when someone insults you once, but when they become comfortable insulting you because they think you will always stay. Now think about Ryan for a moment. He was not just a weak husband standing between his wife and his mother. He was worse than that. He was a man who benefited from his wife's sacrifices while pretending those sacrifices did not exist. He liked the house. He liked the status. He liked the comfort. He liked the polished life Alyssa helped maintain. But when his mother humiliated Alyssa in front of his friends, he did not protect her. He laughed. And that laugh matters. Sometimes betrayal is not a dramatic affair, a secret message, or a late-night confession. Sometimes betrayal is your husband laughing while someone reduces you to a servant. That one line, "She knows her place," tells us everything about the marriage. Ryan did not see Alyssa as a partner in that moment. He saw her as someone trained to absorb disrespect. And when a husband allows another person to define his wife's place beneath him, he has already abandoned the marriage, even if he still sleeps in the same bed. That is why Alyssa leaving the ring behind was not sudden. Emotionally, the marriage had already died in that kitchen. But here is the part I really want you to notice. Alyssa did not scream. She did not beg Ryan to defend her. She did not argue with Carol for 3 hours trying to prove she deserved basic respect. She smiled, nodded, and let them believe they had won. That kind of calm can be terrifying because it means the person is no longer trying to be understood. She has moved beyond explanation. She has entered decision. Have you ever reached that point in your life? Not the angry point. Not the crying point, the quiet point. The point where someone says something cruel and you suddenly do not feel the need to answer. You just think, okay, now I know exactly who you are. That is the point where power shifts. Carol did not recognize it because arrogant people are terrible at reading silence. They think silence means weakness. They do not understand that sometimes silence is the sound of someone collecting evidence. Carol's character is especially interesting because she is not just a rude mother-in-law. She is a social performer. She builds her identity through appearances: the perfect house, the perfect dinner, the perfect family name, the perfect holiday tradition. But none of it is truly hers. That is the central irony of the story. Carol is obsessed with ownership, status, and reputation, yet the entire stage she stands on belongs to the woman she disrespects. That makes the house twist so satisfying. It is not just a legal twist. It is symbolic. The house represents power. Carol thinks power means acting like you own the room. Alyssa proves power means actually holding the truth behind the room. Carol has the voice, the dress, the guests, and the performance. Alyssa has the deed, the documents, the attorney, and the timing. That contrast is what makes the revenge sharp. And let's talk about that timing, because revenge in this story is not random. Alyssa does not expose them on an ordinary Tuesday. She waits until Christmas morning, when Carol's entire reputation is standing in the foyer wearing holiday clothes. That is not accidental. Carol wanted an audience. Alyssa gave her one. Carol wanted 50 people to witness Alyssa serving. Alyssa made 50 people witness Carol being exposed. That is poetic justice. The empty kitchen is also more powerful than it first seems. Food is comfort. Food is tradition. Food is control in Carol's world. She expects Alyssa to feed her guests because she believes Alyssa's role is service. So when the kitchen is empty, it is not simply inconvenient. It is a visual rebellion. Every empty shelf says, "Your control is over." Every clean counter says, "I am no longer laboring for your image." Every missing dish says, "You cannot consume a woman's dignity and call it family." And then Alyssa redirects the food to a women's shelter. That detail matters. She does not waste the dinner. She does not destroy the food just to be petty. She sends it where it can actually mean something. That makes her revenge morally stronger. Carol wanted to feed pride. Alyssa fed need. Carol wanted applause. Alyssa created warmth. Carol wanted to use generosity as decoration. Alyssa practiced generosity without turning it into a performance. Now ask yourself this: who really understood the meaning of Christmas in that story? The woman demanding a perfect dinner from someone she degraded, or the woman sending a feast to people who were hungry, overlooked, and genuinely grateful? That contrast exposes Carol more deeply than any insult could. Ryan's reaction is also very revealing. When he calls Alyssa, his first real complaint is not that his wife was hurt. It is not that his mother had been using the house. It is not that he failed as a husband. His complaint is, "You embarrassed me." That is the language of a selfish person. He does not measure harm by what was done to Alyssa. He measures harm by how it looked for him. And that is exactly why Alyssa cannot go back. A man who only understands your pain when it damages his image is not sorry. He is inconvenienced. One of the coldest lines in the story is when Alyssa tells him, "I'm ending our marriage because you thought dinner was all I was worth." That sentence cuts deep because it names the real wound. This was never just about cooking. Many people cook for their families with love. Many people host holidays happily. The problem is not labor. The problem is entitlement. The problem is being ordered, mocked, erased, and then told you should be grateful for the privilege of serving people who do not respect you. That is a question worth asking the audience. When does helping become self-erasure? When does being kind become being used? When does family duty become emotional exploitation? These questions are uncomfortable because the line is not always obvious at first. It becomes obvious when your effort is expected but never appreciated. It becomes obvious when people only notice you when you stop serving them. It becomes obvious when your absence creates more panic than your pain ever did. Carol's downfall works because she is exposed by her own behavior. Alyssa does not invent lies about her. She preserves the event page. She keeps the listing. She has documents. She has legal proof. That is another important point. True revenge in a story like this is not chaos. It is precision. Alyssa does not become reckless. She becomes organized. She does not throw accusations into the air. She brings receipts. That is why Carol cannot talk her way out. Manipulators thrive in confusion, but documentation destroys confusion. And the police outside the house? That is the moment emotional disrespect meets real-world consequence. Carol has spent years acting like authority. Then real authority arrives. Court officers, police, an attorney, formal notices. Suddenly her tone does not matter. Her tears do not matter. Her social performance does not matter. She has to leave because the truth has legal weight. That is why the scene feels so satisfying. It is not just revenge. It is reality correcting arrogance. The Hawaii dinner gives the story another layer. Alyssa does not sit alone celebrating the destruction of Ryan and Carol. She gathers the people Carol dismissed as embarrassing. That choice turns revenge into restoration. Carol excluded people to protect her image. Alyssa includes them to rebuild dignity. And that is beautiful because it shows Alyssa is not becoming Carol. She is not using power to humiliate innocent people. She is using power to correct the emotional order of the story. Denise, Megan, Lila, Alyssa's aunt. These characters matter because they represent everyone Carol tried to push out of the frame. They are not glamorous enough for Carol's fake world, but they are real enough for Alyssa's new one. That is one of the strongest emotional contrasts in the entire story. Carol has a full house and no warmth. Alyssa has a smaller circle and real belonging. The house sale at the end is also important. Some people might ask, why sell the house after winning it back? But that decision makes sense. Sometimes reclaiming something does not mean keeping it forever. Sometimes reclaiming means proving it was yours, taking back your power, and then choosing not to live inside the memory of your humiliation. Alyssa does not sell because Carol defeated her. She sells because Carol no longer gets to define the house's meaning. Alyssa decides its final chapter. And giving the house to a woman who turns it into a retreat for women rebuilding their lives, that is not just a plot detail. That is transformation. A place where Alyssa was treated like a servant becomes a place where other women can recover their voices. That is the deepest kind of revenge. Not merely making your enemies suffer, but turning the thing they poisoned into something they can never touch again. Carol standing outside the gate and not being recognized is one of the quietest but most brutal punishments in the story. She wanted status. She wanted to be known. She wanted people to associate that house with her name. Then one day she stands outside it, and the security guard sees her as no one. That is a complete collapse of her identity. She is not removed only from the property. She is removed from the illusion that made her feel powerful. And Ryan's final humiliation is different. Carol loses status. Ryan loses the story he told himself about who he was. He thought he was the man of the house. Then he learns he was living inside his wife's protection. He thought Alyssa was lucky to be married to him. Then he learns he was lucky she stayed as long as she did. That kind of realization can break a person more deeply than public embarrassment. But here is the part I do not want to romanticize. Alyssa's victory still hurts. She does not become instantly happy because revenge works. She loses a marriage. She loses the version of Ryan she once believed in. She has to accept that Carol knew the truth and still degraded her. She has to walk through a home full of memories and separate love from illusion. That is why the ending feels mature. It does not pretend revenge is happiness. It says revenge can clear the path, but healing is what comes after. That is a very real emotional truth. Many people think justice will immediately make them whole. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes justice simply stops the bleeding. After that, you still have to learn how to live without the wound controlling you. Alyssa does that through small things: a quieter home, a smaller table, honest guests, peaceful mornings, cooking only when she wants to. Those details show freedom better than any dramatic speech. So, let me ask you something. Was Alyssa too harsh? Should she have warned them first? Should she have cooked the dinner and confronted them later? Or did Carol and Ryan create exactly the kind of public consequence they deserved by making her humiliation public first? Personally, I think Alyssa did not go too far. She matched the stage they chose. They wanted witnesses when they put her beneath them. They got witnesses when the truth lifted her above them, and that is the line that stays with me. The most dangerous woman in the room is not always the loudest one. That is Alyssa's entire character. She is observant. She is patient. She is wounded, but not foolish. She does not confuse noise with strength. She lets Carol keep talking, lets Ryan keep laughing, lets the guests keep arriving, and then she lets reality enter through the front door. In the end, this story is not about a woman refusing to cook. It is about a woman refusing to be reduced to the kitchen. It is about a wife who finally understands that love without respect is just another form of servitude. It is about a home that becomes a courtroom, a Christmas dinner that becomes an exposure, and a quiet woman who finally stops protecting people from the consequences of their own arrogance. And maybe that is the real question this story leaves us with. How many people in our lives only value us because we keep making their lives easier? How many people call us family only when we are useful? How many people would panic if we stopped carrying the invisible weight? Those are not small questions. They are the kind of questions that reveal whether a relationship is built on love or convenience. Alyssa's revenge feels powerful because she does not just punish Carol and Ryan. She corrects the lie. She takes back the house, the holiday, the narrative, and finally, herself. And once she knows her place, she never lets anyone else define it again. If this story pulled you in, made you angry, or made you think about respect in a different way, make sure to subscribe to Revenge Story for more emotional revenge stories, hidden truths, painful justice, and powerful endings.